We'd like to apologize for the late start, and we thank you for your patience in bearing with us. We will start with the national anthem. I will now ask my colleague, Mr. Richard Carter, to lead us in a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, let us pray. God was here, and even though you weren't. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessing of being able to come together to discuss and consider the issues related to the functioning of our community and our country. We thank you that we live in a blessed place that allows us the freedom to congregate, to deliberate without fear of persecution. We ask your blessing on all of those who are gathered here. Let us consult and discuss in the spirit of openness, freedom, tolerance, and understanding. We ask that you bless those who are on their way and bring them here safely. And when our deliberations will finish, we pray that you will take us to our homes in safety. These mercies we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce myself as well. My name is Krista Howell, and to my right I have Mr. Barney Gibbs, and we are all members of the Thorne Commission. I'd also at this time like to acknowledge the presence of Minister John King. I'd also like to acknowledge MP, Attorney at Law and Member of Parliament Ralph Thorne, and I'd also like to acknowledge Ambassador to CARICOM David Comachon.
Mr. Ford.
Oh, I did not see you. My apologies, Minister Ford. Welcome, and thank you for being here. We are here to gather input from the members of the community in the lovely parish of St. Phillip to garner your ideas and your input as to your vision for these commissions and these people's assemblies. We do not want it to be an exercise where we just come and dictate to you what they would look like, but to also hear from you what you would like to see happening and how you would like it to be structured. And we are going around to different parishes by means of these town halls to be able to gather input from everyone in the communities so that your voices can be heard, and so this is much your people's assemblies as it is ours, because it does not belong to any one person or entity. Just to give a bit of a background, the People's Assemblies will be community-based and will have approximately 30 members for each of the 20 proposed assemblies, which would then have in total approximately 600 members that will be coordinated to carry out national duties. The functions of these assemblies will be to have oversight over government agencies, engage in community well-being, look after environmental improvements and protection, focus on education, engage in community development and sports, look after vendor licensing, community forums, planning permissions, government development, and be a people's cooperative. The proposed structure would be for there to be one assembly in the parishes of St. Lucy, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas. The parishes of St. George, St. Peter, St. Phillip, and St. James would have 2 assemblies. Christ Church will have 3, and St. Michael will have 4. This was decided based on the population density, as certain areas, because of the number of persons within these parishes, we thought it would be best to have more assemblies. However, if you think that your particular parish would need more or less, if you think it's best to combine with another parish, however you think the structure would work best for you, that is all open for discussion. In terms of selecting persons for these assemblies, we're proposing that persons who have an interest in assisting their communities in the aforementioned areas would submit a CV, and this CV is used loosely. It's not in the academic idea where you present a whole bunch of qualifications and try to make it as though it's only for persons who have an academic background, but we are looking for persons who would have history of helping their communities, of being involved in some of the areas that we would have mentioned, who have a love and a passion and can reflect that in how they would present at their town hall when it is time for them to be elected. We're also expecting that you'll be able to speak to the persons who are there, so that when it's time to vote for persons, you can present your case as to why you think you would be a suitable candidate to go forward for one of the People's Assemblies. The proposal is also to have some of persons from the private sector, approximately 10. We have 10 persons from public office, and we also have 10 students that will be comprised from the University of the West Indies, Samuel Jackman, Barbadian Community College, and the senior body of secondary schools. However, if we also believe that younger persons are passionate enough to step forward and be representative for their communities, that is also open for discussion as well. We are coming with a proposal, but please do not think that everything is set in stone and you don't have any input or any say. If there's a strong enough voice for certain things to be changed, we are certainly open to that, and this is where you come in. So we have, of course, an open floor for questions, but we also have some proposed questions that we can give you as well, so that you can give your feedback on what you think should happen. So some of the queries include: do you support a system of local government in Barbados? Do you support the proposal that each assembly must be non-partisan? Do you support the proposal for each assembly to have 30 persons? What do you think should be the minimum age for membership on a people's assembly? Do you support the proposal that each assembly should comprise a mix of elected private persons who live in the geographical area, together with persons nominated from specific departments in the public service? Do you think that the nominated public servant should sit on the assembly in his or her capacity as a public servant, or should they sit as a private citizen? Noting that each assembly may cover more than one constituency, what do you think should be the relationship between the People's Assembly and the parliamentary representative, if any at all? And should sessions of the Assembly be generally conducted in public? And the last query, when would you wish to see a system of local government implemented in Barbados? And at this time, I will open the floor for any questions, comments. Please feel free to come to the mic. Pardon? You want to?
Good night, everyone. My name is Barney Gibbs, and I'm really here as a private citizen. Just like everyone else in this room, I have questions about the entire the process, but I can speak to what I do know. I know that while the system of government that we have has, I guess, served us reasonably well over the years, it could be better. It could be a lot better. And it would be better, I truly believe, if we as citizens had a means by which we could have a say more often every 5 years. And I think that is what my colleagues on the Commission are trying to achieve, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Commission, is to really create a formal mechanism by which that can happen. Because right now, as we speak in this room, there are pockets of communion all over this island. There are people in churches and mosques and fraternal organizations. There are people who maybe are sitting in a hairdresser's office and talking about ways that they think Barbados could be better, or maybe complaining about things that they would like to see done. But who is hearing them? You know, and how, and more importantly, if they're heard, how is that translating into action and into policy? And so I'm here to give my support because I think it's really, really important that we get it right. And that is why the Commission is asking for feedback from the public, because if we get it right, it could be transformative.
Hi, good night. My name is Carol Harris, and I have certain comments and maybe operational questions. My first comment is I don't know if you can recognize I have a slight accent. So one of my questions is, and I might be representing some non-nationals who I find we contribute to society. I've been living here really long, and yet I still turn on VOB and I would hear some hurtful things about non-nationals, as if we're lumped together, you know, as one group. And I would like to know if non-nationals would be accepted and allowed to participate, because we, you know, there was a fight about can we vote, what can we do? So I would like to volunteer and contribute because I live here, my daughter's Bajan, so I would like to contribute to my community, and I'm sure there are lots of non-nationals. We participate in sports, we help and contribute. This is our home. So I'm hoping that the Commission would create a room for us. So even if we mightn't be visible in society, because I heard one of the things you said was that one of the criteria is how involved are you in society? But sometimes we hold back because we might sense we're not fully welcome. So I would hope that even if we're not actively on every single committee, that we can still bring our skill. I'm a skilled national, and I know I have a lot to contribute. So that's one of my questions about the involvement of non-nationals. Right, that's one thing. And then an operational question. There are lots of NGOs doing some of the things that you want to do. I know with some developed countries, when they have local government, you actually have officers with powers who can issue tickets. So one of the things we have, and I'm from St. It's a very proud petition, by the way, we have litter wardens, and there's so much power in litter wardens. If you can ticket people for overgrown vegetation, because a lot of the times the overgrown vegetation, there's a private landowner, and that landowner should be held accountable for their vegetation growing in the road. And I'm trying to figure out, why are we paying over and over to clean private land? That's one. The other question, when the assembly members intend to do something, let's say you're cleaning a particular area and then somebody comes from another area. Sorry, my area of expertise is sanitation, so forgive me for my question in that area. When that person, let's say the people get together, they clean an area, and a business owner, somebody comes and dumps illegally, what power would they have? What powers would you be given to assembly members? It's one thing for us to do for our community, but there are other individuals in the community who don't care the same. There's a lot of illegal dumping, and the individuals out there, they're not in these meetings, they mightn't watch it on Facebook, but they're still part of the community. And no matter how much you educate, they're still going to do that. So would members of the community be given some authority to ticket, or what power would we have? Right.
I will give each person on the panel an opportunity to address the questions, because the issue of non-national participation has not been discussed with the Commission. I would give my personal input. I will let my colleagues give their personal input, and if the chairperson and deputy chairperson would also like to give their input, I will open the floor for that as well. My personal view for non-nationals, this came up during elections as well. Non-nationals contribute to society. They pay taxes, they work in jobs that help to generate income for the economy, they contribute socially. And I think if a person is giving to this country and has a willingness to step up to contribute even more, I personally do not think that someone with that kind of spirit should be discouraged. I personally know non-nationals that have given more to this country than persons who are Barbadians. And I know there's no one answer, and my opinion alone will not carry all of the weight. However, I fully support if a non-national has a love for this country and wants to support, I think they should be given the opportunity to do so. I'm not sure if my colleagues would like to comment.
My only comment on that would that there should be some minimum criteria such as residency. I think if someone is legally resident in Barbados, whether they're here on a student visa or a work visa, or here as a CARICOM national, approved CARICOM national, that they should absolutely be allowed to run for an assembly.
Well, you asked two questions and posed the issue of the non-national participation. So thank you for raising that, because as the chair said, it is not one that was flagged with us before. So thank you for raising it for our consideration. The basis on which members of the councils will be chosen is by virtue of election in their communities or in their districts. And therefore, if you, whatever your nationality, are resident in the district, and members of that community select you on the basis of either your contribution or your potential for making a difference, then that would be the right of all of the members who are in that district, as far as I can see. By the way, none of the proposals that are put here have actually do actually have the force of law as yet. And therefore, given that you flagged this, it is probably something that we need to consider whether or not there has to be a provision for it in the regulations that will govern the operations. But as far as I can see, and based on my understanding, once a person is selected or elected by the members of the community in which they are resident, then that person can stand to be a member of the council, whatever their nationality. That would be a secondary consideration. In the same way we have freedom of movement within CARICOM, in the same way as persons holding CARICOM skill certificates and are able to move and work and enjoy the benefits of being a citizen of CARICOM, by the same token, then an individual who is living and resident in a particular community can, by that same token, be a member of the constituency, or not the constituency, the People's Assemblies. Constituency is sticking in my mind because that was, of course, one of the previous forms that we have, and it is probably only the third time I've heard it, the word used tonight. And one of the important considerations is that this whole process is apolitical. I'm sure that it is something that will come up further on in the discussion. Let me just say something quickly on the other two issues that you flagged. You spoke about non-governmental organizations and their role and support. NGOs are part of the community, and therefore persons who are serving on non-governmental organizations, and I'll probably have to start shouting now. Persons who are serving on non-governmental organizations, persons who are representative on non-governmental organizations do have the scope to make a contribution in the assemblies. It may well be that the NGOs themselves may put forward their members to serve, but persons will not be elected by virtue of being a member of an NGO. You will be elected by virtue of being a member of the community and by virtue of the contribution that your fellow members of the community feel that you can make. Outside of those other special categories like students and so on, which are proposed. The final matter that you raised was on the issue of illegal dumping and issues like that, whether or not the council will be able to issue penalties in relation to that. There is a section of the proposal that deals with environmental matters. Illegal dumping is against the law, and that is basically where it starts. It is illegal by virtue of contravening the laws of Barbados. It would therefore not be up to the constituency or the community councils or the People's Assemblies to actually enforce the law. That is the responsibility of the police force, to police either persons' adherence to the law or otherwise. But if you live in a community, if you're a member of the People's Assembly, and because you are much closer to the action than would otherwise be the case, then it would be up to you to have access to either the Royal Barbados Police Force or the other agencies to ensure that the laws of the country are respected, particularly with respect to environmental matters. So I wouldn't see the constituency, or I keep saying constituency, I wouldn't see the People's Assemblies issuing things like tickets or anything, but I would see them raising the issue with the Royal Barbados Police Force or the other agencies, and then them taking the action because it would be in contravention of the law of Barbados. Somebody passed a note in relation to the fans, which are really, really noisy. I don't know if we turn them off, if it will make it too uncomfortable, but perhaps we can try and see, because they really are very noisy.
In the meantime, hello? Microphone is down. In the meantime, if there are any other questions, please feel free to come to the microphone and introduce yourself, and we're here to listen.
Good night,
Good night.
Madam Chair. My name is Jerome Davis, and I'm from St. Phillip. I have a few concerns with, first of all, the designation given to the entity, and then the structure. People's Assembly, somehow, for me personally, does not meet what I would expect of the structure that you're intending to bring to the community. I know and understand why you do not want to say constituency councils. I know you'll never go there. You want to distance yourself from that term. But if that's the case, I do not see why we could not have community councils instead of constituency councils. For me, I see an assembly as what we have here tonight, where the council will call an assembly of the residents under its mandate. This to me is an assembly of people, but not the council. Now, in terms of the number of assemblies, you said there are going to be 20. Now, Barbados is divided into 11 parishes. It is subdivided into 30 constituencies. I don't see the need now to want to further subdivide it into 20-something, whatever you want to call it. Why are we trying to avoid constituencies? There are 30 of them. Let us have 30 community councils. My personal, humble opinion. I think the number of persons on the assemblies, as you call them, the number is too great. 30 on a council. I can see you having 15 persons sitting on a council to meet, to plan. You can have subcommittees, which would, of course, probably involve other persons. But for me, as a chair or whatever it is of that council or people's assembly, to call a meeting of 30 people where they want a plan, to me, doesn't make sense.
Just to interject, I'm not sure if you have any other questions, and we will get back to you if you do. But the issue of the number being too much actually came up at the St. Lucie Townhall. And I gave the example, I am a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, and we have different volunteer groups for different areas. And as you can imagine, we are a body of approximately over 1,000 members, and we have volunteers for different areas, including communications, membership, etc. And some of these volunteer committees have up to 30 persons volunteering, and it is never enough. The reason why we have proposed that many persons, I would just reiterate some of the areas that we're looking at. There are proposed 10 functions proposed. So if you take that 30 volunteers and you divide it by the number of functions, you already only have 3 persons for each proposed function. And the idea is not that you will have every single meeting having 30 persons. Functionally, you can have 5 persons looking after education, or 2 persons looking after community well-being.
Ma'am, I see where you're going.
Right.
But I'm saying to you, a council of 15 can still achieve that, but you would not make the council 30 people.
As a person who has
You
been
understand what I'm
on
saying?
many volunteer groups, the more persons
No, you're
makes
missing
the
my
work
point, ma'am. You're
a
missing my
lot
point.
lighter.
The council can have 100 volunteers, but the council should be 15 persons. That's my suggestion, right?
How do we
Thank
come
you.
up with a number?
Right, it doesn't have to be 15, it could be 16, but 30, too many. We can have 100 people helping. And I hope, ma'am, let me say this now. The last time I sat in a town hall meeting was at St. Mark's, where we were knocking down an old community center. And they came to us for suggestions. And we suggested, and we suggested. We will get back to you. They did come back to us, but when we asked or we suggested, it was like, you're giving trouble. And you know what happened? We now have a resource center at St. Mark's, which is lovely on the outside, but no use to the community. Learn to listen to the people from the community. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I just wanted to say one thing in relation to the constituency. I myself actually got trapped in using the word, even though it is not one of the terms that is being used for the people's assemblies. The thing about constituencies, though, is that constituencies are an artificiality when you're talking about communities. The constituency boundaries sometimes run right down the middle of the road, and persons living on one side of the road belong to one constituency, and living on another belong to another. So that's an artificiality if you're talking about bringing people together to consider and discuss issues related to community. We are not necessarily going to get away from it if you organize yourselves into 20 districts, but my suggestion for the council that is discussing this is for us to ensure that when we are looking at boundaries, that we demarcate boundaries that build and preserve the integrity of communities rather than to split them. And sometimes it is almost as though you have one house almost split down the middle when you start talking about constituencies. So that would be my response to the suggestion of using constituencies, pure and simple.
Mr. Innes or Davis, I'm not sure. Mr. Davis, I also just wanted to make the comment that while I appreciate the logistical issue that you raised about, convening 30 people, I myself am involved with a community neighborhood group where the decision-making body is pretty large. I think it's probably about 40 people. But we don't ever really meet in one room anymore. Technology has brought us to the point where we can form a WhatsApp group and get decisions made fairly quickly. And so while the point is very valid, I do think that there's been some movement in the technology which we're suggesting could be leveraged to alleviate that or mitigate that problem that you raised.
Good evening, my name is Ian Brown, and I want to pick up from where Jerome left off actually, and where the Carter is, right?
It's the Carter, yeah.
Yeah. And it is with the assemblies, and I see you have here the assemblies will be one in St. Lucie, whatever. And you're saying that no matter what you do, you will have this demarcation. From where you sit, no matter how you try to do it, you will have a situation where once you're dealing with roads, you will always have the situation of one person on one side of the road being in one place and another person in another place. So I don't think we can get away from that. So my question would be, if you're looking at these assemblies, and from a management point of view, because I also see here that it says that the elections can be organized by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. I know they can, and I was wondering if it isn't by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, whom will it be? Because by the Constitution, the Electoral and Boundaries Commission are at present, the only constituted persons to conduct elections in Barbados. So I would believe that you would look a bit further at that. And if it is the Electoral and Boundaries Commission that may be responsible for the conduct of elections, I would humbly suggest that you revisit how you may want to do the actual selection, i.e., and this is where I have to disagree with you, sir, that the constituencies will be the easier way of putting together the assemblies, the whatever you want to call it. Because I, like Jerome, I don't like the word assembly, because assembly to me connotates something different, right? And if you're going to use that, I would suggest that maybe in like I see here, St. Phillip has 2, but there are 3 constituencies in St. Phillip as it stands. Christchurch has 5. Christchurch may be easier because Christchurch as a parish, just about all the constituencies in Christchurch belong to Christchurch. But in St. Phillip, now when you get to St. Phillip and you have two assemblies for 3 constituencies, then we may very well have to look and say, well, St. Philip West, or demarcate the constituencies that belong to the assembly, to the respective assemblies, so that from a management point of view and also from an electoral point of view, it would be easier to manage, because if you're going to conduct elections, then it will mean like having two sets of lists where it is already established that the list per constituencies. So for the management and the running of the elections, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you don't have to go and do any extra work. You have it all there, but you may very well be able to say, well, 4 constituencies in Christchurch make up Assembly number 1 or Assembly number 2, and from that point of view, to me, it will make for better operations. As far as the community aspect is concerned, most of us, I believe, in this room would have been involved in community work at some point. I don't really see that as a big issue, because my problem with roads in St. Philip is the same problem with persons with roads in Christchurch and St. Lucie and wherever. So if we're going to be looking at these things that we have here assembled, I don't think that one assembly in any way will be dealing with the matters different from another assembly, because if garbage is a problem, garbage is a problem, unless the garbage is not being collected in St. Philip and then is being collected somewhere else, then we will say, well, there must be some issue. The other thing I would want to understand is the actual functioning of the I prefer councils, quite honestly, because in other jurisdictions, the councils, have a certain responsibility. Yes, they are elected. Again, you're having an election process by whichever means fair. But then you know that these councils have a set time to meet. They're discussing these matters. The people can, or this is maybe is another question, will persons be allowed to be part of the discussions that are being held? That to me is something that warrants some kind of thought as well. Because for me, I know that there's a council, and I know that I can leave home and come to a specific place to air whatever is my grievance or whatever, which for most persons mean there's a physical building somewhere that we can go to. I don't know how you envisage this, but I also see it as having a staff. And therefore, if you're going to have a staff, to me that, again, connotates some kind of permanency. Because if you're supposed to operate and have or address these issues, I don't understand then what will be the difference between going to my MP to tell him that my street light is out, or from walking down to some building somewhere here to sit and see someone to tell them the same thing. So I believe that we will have to look at the setup of this carefully, and quite frankly, at the end of the day, I believe it's going to be difficult to differentiate some of what is happening with the councils from the actual politics of the community. I understand and I appreciate that one of the things you may be trying to do is to get back community life and community spirit. But it is difficult in 2020, because I assume that these will be coming on board, something like that, to kind of divorce what may be happening politically from what may be happening community-wise. Thanks.
Can I just make with the permission of the chair, just to respond to the last point that you made. And by the way, we've heard 2 suggestions so far for going with the constituencies as opposed to the 20 that has been proposed. And as the chair said, we are here to listen. We are not here to defend anything that is put here on paper. So we've heard 2 suggestions. People might have other views. I just wanted, however, to respond to the last point you made, Mr. Brown. You said that it is going to be difficult to divorce what is being proposed here from the politics. Sorry? Yeah, and I'm responding to what you said in terms of your opinion. My response to that is that the difficulty will be compounded if you start with constituencies, because those are by their very nature political. And if your intent is to move this away from partisan political differentiation to a genuine community-level organization, that difficulty of separating that is compounded if you start out by saying the divisions are on the basis of political constituencies.
I don't mean to just a suggestion though, because I'm thinking Barbados doesn't have the resources right now. Right now, as far as I understand, the country, we're working our way back up. And I used to live in Corbins Road in Ashton Hall in St. Peter, and it had a fabulous sense of community. The community members pooled their money together without the office, pooled their money together and patched the roads themselves. So and it was featured in the Nation newspaper. And when the bush was overgrown, the men got together and they cut the bush themselves. And I'm thinking, I'm assuming part of this whole effort is to get action. Meetings are good, record keeping is good, but I think I would love to cut some bush along the side of the road. I want to walk, right? I want to walk. I want to be able to not have to step in the bush. So, I mean, nothing wrong with neighbors getting together, because there's some villages that like when I came here first, and I lived in Warrens, not Warrens, Wanstead, where all the students live, I could not tell you who the neighbors were. People would drive right in the house and stay in there. And what is so wrong, I'm assuming we don't have money, but if people really want to see a difference, you would say, hey neighbor, this area overgrown, we get the clearance, I'm assuming this is the government interactions, get the clearance and permission to go and clean that area. And if people invest and care about their own community, it will stay cleaner. And you want to set an example for young people. One of the things I grew up with in St. Kitts, I have to say it over and over, we had a general area, and we got no minister, no politician. We wanted it clean, we cleaned it ourselves. So the country doesn't have money. To me, you shouldn't overcomplicate it. You don't have money because, like I said, office with the staff, you have electricity. What is wrong in getting together by somebody's house? I mean, you don't want people in your house, on your veranda, under a lamp, under a tree. You get together, you want the area clean, you want to help an old neighbor, there's somebody, we all have a neighbor who lives by themselves, and I don't know how many people go and visit the neighbors. What is wrong with this sense of community? Yes, the government initiating it, but I feel we should take it on ourselves and say, hey, we have a neighbor, why can't we go visit that neighbor? Give the neighbor some milk and sugar. Don't wait for them to go in the Nation newspaper and beg. And I'm saying, why are so many people begging in the newspaper? And people here sitting around and don't help. So I am hoping and praying that we're going to get too caught up in names. You could name it whatever, as far as I'm concerned. Name it whatever. But if we care about each other, just care about your neighbor. I am going to get older. I would like to feel that if I don't have any children, that my neighbors would say, well, Miss Harris over there, she might want somebody to go to the post office. And you invade your neighbor's space and say, neighbor, I can help you. So I'm hoping that part of what comes out of this is building a sense of community, because I'll tell you, right, the thing I admire about Barbados is Bajan pride. People will defend Barbados, it's the best. But sometimes when you sit in the community, you wonder, where are my neighbors? Who are my neighbors? And I think we should focus more on helping one another. Even if this is a government-initiated event, we focus on helping one another. Not me beating down on you, just my opinion. My opinion.
I commend you for your comments, and I echo your sentiment. The idea behind it is that, because the other area that was brought up is that every community has the same problems. The reality is that different communities may place different priorities on certain areas. And also the issue came up where you mentioned a community getting together and deciding to just pool their money and pool their resources to do certain things. Not every community can afford to do that. And that's also the idea behind this as well, that you would be able to have a budget and decide this is a priority for our community, this is where we live. We're not depending on any constituency to decide for us, any politician, anything like that. We as a community have decided we want to make sure that our elderly are taken care of. We want to make sure our roads are debushed. We want to make sure this can happen. And we now have the resources and the autonomy to make these decisions for ourselves and to make them happen. And I do agree. Me personally, I'm also not very caught up on the names. I know that everybody's not the same, and there's a place for everyone's opinions for sure. But I definitely do appreciate, me personally, the comments that you would have made. I believe there was somebody else who was... Yes.
Is Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Your reference to if it's constituency-based, it will be seen as political. There is an organization called a District Emergency Organization. There are 30 of them. Nobody perceived them as being political. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm just listening to the feedback. I had taken some notes earlier, and some of the comments were already addressed. But I'm sitting here, as I did earlier. I mean, the participation has grown, but the communities that are supposed to be, that we are supposed to be working from, the people, the representatives, are not here. I'm just wondering what happened at the other meetings so far, the 3 that you would have had, and if
this would be the 3rd one.
Okay. The 2 that you would have had, right? Yes, because there's one more. I'm just wondering if Barbadians generally are, or if you're getting a feeling that Barbadians generally want to get involved in their thing. I totally agree with what y'all are doing. I grew up in an era, I may not look it, but I like my village life, my community life, where you can leave your doors open and interact with each other, you know, swap food, whatever. We are in a time when we can't do that. Sometimes you cannot even open your door now. And there is a great sense of fear out there. People are not here to represent themselves or speak. I am concerned with the requirements for the council now. I mean, I can write a CV and send it in. But then who is electing you? If people are not coming out to hear what is happening and what options they have, how is that going to be rolled out? If, you know, because, I mean, I must admit that the commission itself was advertised constantly in your face on TV, in the paper and whatnot. So I expected greater participation, right? Now, as far as community getting things done, we all should be, totally agree, looking out for each other. But I think that things like the golden rule, we've probably heard it before. I strongly believe in that. We have to address those things, put that in people's faces, try to wake them up to see that what negatively is impacting them can be improved if it starts with the I, and what I do to somebody else, how would I feel, right? We have, you, the committee members, however we do it, we have to educate people first. This is a learning experience. I don't usually get out to things, right? But I'm just suggesting that we need to do more educational blitz to the populace to try to wake them up. People are complaining every day, but then they're doing it in the bathroom where you do not get a response, right? And communities can be big or they can be small, but you are restricted or can be restricted in that community based upon whatever is happening around you. And then there's fear, right? How are those things going to be addressed? Because somewhere back there in one of the comments you say that you would liaise with the police or the sanitation or whatever, but if you're not empowered to do so, then we're going down the wrong hill again. I will sit now and go back through my notes again, but I just wanted to get over that point, that we need to get more people to wake up and know that everything improvement-wise starts with me. Yeah?
Thank you for your comments. I will also share this for the panel as well in terms of a response. I was actually having a conversation with one of my fellow members, Mr. Mohammed, and our concern was that persons will feel as though it can't work, and by automatically assuming it can't work, don't contribute to it working. So it is our responsibility to make sure that persons have that sense of hope that this can help to build their communities, that this is something they can participate in. Your other concern with relation to whether it will have any authority, that also came up at the St. Lucie Town Hall, where persons were concerned that if you can't get through to government officials, no. If you can't get through to sanitation, if you can't get through to persons in a higher capacity, what authority will these different assemblies have to be able to mobilize these persons if the community decides they want to have a greater interaction with sanitation? How do you get them then to come out? And that is something that we have to work on as an assembly, to be able to make sure that however these are done, that you don't come up with the same roadblocks that you're currently experiencing, where you've identified exactly what you would like to happen within your people's assemblies, but you hit a roadblock and nothing happens, and then you have the impression that it is not working, because that is the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve. And I know that our deputy chair, Mr. Commission, would have spoken on this at the St. Lucie Assembly in terms of how much authority we are going to have. I don't know if you would like to share what the comments you would have made at the St. Lucie Town Hall. Okay.
Good evening. I think we have to be very clear that the people's assemblies will have their own sphere of operations and autonomy. Similarly, the members of parliament will have their own sphere of autonomy and operations, central government, the statutory corporations. So I think we need to be very clear that we are not proposing something where the People's Assembly assume the world and the People's Assembly is doing everything. We have to be sensible and realistic and work out what is the proper sphere of operations and autonomy for the People's Assembly and how that relates to the MP, the central government, the statutory corporations. So, for example, we are envisaging that the People's Assembly would have some kind of environmental fund that will be available to the People's Assembly to do some environmental work in the area on its own accord. But we are also envisaging, so yes, emergency cases of overgrown bush and so forth. People's Assembly will have some resources that it could apply to dealing with that on its own. But there will be issues where, rather than the People's Assembly doing it on its own, the People's Assembly will be engaging with the City Sanitation Service Authority. So we have to make those demarcations. Also, we are proposing that the People's Assemblies collectively will constitute citizens' oversight committees in relation to government agencies that provide services to the people. So sanitation would be another one. So this proposal envisaged that the People's Assemblies collectively will put together an oversight committee that is holding the Sanitation Service Authority accountable, and that there will be legally enacted regulations that give that oversight committee the power to engage with the Sanitation Service Authority, to bring the complaints of the public to their attention, to have meetings, to discuss, to demand remedies, to have follow-up meetings to see if what was discussed has been implemented and so forth. But so we have to work it out. I mean, that's why we're having these consultations, because this is still very much a proposal that is being concretized, so we have to work it out. And but I want us to be very clear, because sometimes you hear some comments and you get the impression that some people are thinking that a People's Assembly has come now to take over everything, and it will be doing the work that the MP is supposed to be doing and central government is supposed to be doing and the statutory corporations. No, that would be very unrealistic, particularly when you're talking about voluntary structures, right? So we have to be very sensible and realistic, thinking through what are the functions we want these assemblies to perform, and how do we demarcate those functions, and how do those functions relate to the legitimate functions of members of parliament, central government, statutory corporations. So I just want to make that clear. So it's not that we are expecting these people's assemblies to, take over everything. Okay? That helps? Okay.
Before we take the question, I just wanted to address the last speaker's question, which I thought was good and important in that it brings up this whole thorny issue of participation. When in fact, I believe the reason for being of these proposed assemblies is to encourage participation. And this is my personal view, but I think some of the structures that have been proposed or built into the assemblies may well help to mitigate some of the alienation that people feel right now from the decision-making process. I speak now about non-nationals and the youth. I mean, the very, very first question we had tonight was, a lady said, "I'm a non-national, can I contribute? Will this structure help me to contribute, enable me?" The youth, we don't have a lot of youngsters in the what I would consider a youngster in the audience tonight, but the proposed assemblies speak to having one male and one female student from each secondary school. It speaks to UE student body, electing 10 students, and so on. So we can see where it may well be that this then becomes a mechanism for participation.
It's funny because I wrote the word children there because I wanted to say earlier that this, along with everything else that I usually think of, if you go to the children go home, the primary school children, they go home and say, "But mommy, my teacher said not to do that or do this." So if they are educated and encouraged, right, to go along with the commission and the whole idea, they can go home and keep nudging and prodding the parents who, at this point in time, are extremely busy. But they can also lend support to the whole thing, not just the teenagers that might be on the assembly, but those kindergarten children, they can get the parents to do things. Yes? Having said that, too, generally, small thing like the garbage, right? I was away recently, and I myself didn't realize what it was, but there was a nice smiley face, a clown's face. Sorry, a nice smiley face, a clown's face, looking at me, and my little granddaughter was just up to it making faces and whatnot. And I said, but what is that? It's a garbage can. But there it is that is encouraging people, the children and the adults, to put the litter where it should go. So I was just want to say that that is things that we can consider. And it was just a plastic thing, but very attractive. So all those little things we can use to help clean up even the communities. Yes?
Good evening. My name is Everton Kamabat.
Good evening.
I want to make a couple observations in respect of this whole thing. It does not have legislative teeth. Another reality is that you are seeking to create, and I support it, but we have to be careful not to be duplicating. We have in any one parish or constituency or community a whole myriad of professionals. The community development officer, the welfare officer, the sports council officer. From the polyclinic, you have public health nurses responsible for psychiatry and neonatal care. If you add all of these professional functionaries, you will find that you have almost 30 people or nearly there. So my first curiosity really is, how does the council really function to collaborate with these officers who are on the ground and professionally functioning every day? Because essentially what I think we want to achieve by any participation is greater efficiencies in the delivery of services by the state, and secondly, I suppose, the mobilization of communities for various actions and so on at a voluntary level. I had a brief glance last night at the document that has been in circulation, and what I'm seeing there, really and truly, from my own little experience over the years, tells me that there's a lot of reworking to be done if this thing is to be a real relevant and effective mechanism in delivering a higher form of governance in the country. I am not seeing really where we are achieving that by some of the various subsects and so on I see you have in there. The point that I want to suggest really is that we can make this thing a lot more simple than we are advancing, perhaps by having no more than 2 or 3 subcommittees that work in some broadly defined areas, so that if you're dealing, for example, with community development or social welfare and such like, there is a committee that works and relates with the community development officer and all the other officers that are paid on a full-time basis. The last thing we really should be encouraging is duplication at this stage. In addition to this, you have also a parliamentary representative who is already charged with doing all that the council is intending to be doing. He has, as in the case of this parliament, where they're all ministers, in addition to a constituency aide, there is a executive assistant to ministers. So there's a whole slew of people already earning at a professional level from the engagements to deliver better services and so on. What is required, to my mind, is In addition to those communities, to those committees that will function to deliver, specifically whether it is related to sports or community program through community development, I would hate to think that we are going to be in a situation where I hear Commission talking about having a fund, an environmental fund. A lot of this is pretty much similar to what existed in the constituency councils of the last dispensation. I don't know how successful they were, because one of the observations I made halfway in that tenure as well was that a lot of the volunteers after a while realized that there's no money in this for them and they were done with it. That NP drawing a salary that every time the NUPW succeeds in getting the salary increase for the civil servant, automatically the MP gets an increase. But at the same time, more and more of his work is being ceded to volunteers. So you got to be careful with that there too. I personally feel that the parliamentarian should really be at the center of the whole thing. He is the elected representative. First past the post system, whether it's by one vote, or 60% of the votes, 90% or whatever, he is the representative of the constituency. And everything that's being done, therefore, by forums like of this sort really is to assist him in ensuring that there is greater delivery and more efficient delivery of services. These are some of the things that I think we need to look at a little more carefully, because and I suppose when you have the commissions and other people of various interests, you want to do more and more. So there's no talk about looking at oversight and sanitation and oversight. All of that is already built into my mind. If we have communities that are dealing with community services, youth and community development activities, and they work in an organized and very systematic way. But this is going to require some kind of secretariat to support that work. It cannot be done. Don't fool yourself that it will be done because 30 people meet tonight, 15 people meet in a committee 3 days later, perhaps at the school hall or at some other place, and go away. The days of that kind of volunteerism really and truly gone through the others. A long time ago, you need a secretariat that can facilitate. And I don't know how you perhaps can explain to me, based on the cost restraints, how we are going to engage. But it cannot function without a secretariat, and that secretariat should have already the constituency aid should be in our secretariat. Because everything that's coming up, what's going to happen if you don't do it this way is that the council is going to bypass ministers very often and find themselves down at sanitation dealing with the issue, when in truth and in fact, the minister is the person that ought to be interfacing at that level. Where you want your council interfacing is with the delivery agencies at the local level. That is really where you want your focus, and not being too confused then with things of those sorts. You're not an executive. You don't have legislative authority, and essentially we are but a group of volunteers seeking to do something to make political representation and public service more effective and efficient. So I hope we can consider really a few of these things, because when we get into these constituency councils and we got to be discussing and debating accountability. What aspect of accountability we discussing? Whether the man built the road or whether the minister did the right thing in what he just did? I'm not clear yet as to what we're talking about when we talk about accountability there. The interface between the council and MTW with the parliamentary representative, and it is in politics because the parliamentary representative is the legal representative for the area. That's why I am tending to support Jerome's idea that to be talking about a structure that does not recognize the constituency structure is not necessarily the best approach at this stage in any governmental structure. I am stressing that the representative and his or her personal assistant ought to be very involved. That personal assistant should practically be at the center of all of those deliberations relating to issues of services, whether it is with MTW and everybody else. But there has to be a formal way and a constructive way of packaging and preparing and making representation to and for, the services. There's an MTW depot. I am certain many mornings John can pick up the phone and ask if they can soon get to the road over there. That's the same thing that the council got to be doing. The minister himself or the representative himself is the one who is essentially charged with these responsibilities. So what we might want to encourage the participation, I like the idea because it is a way of really trying to refashion the way we do things and getting down and ensuring that the deliverables reach the targets and that we know exactly who we are targeting with what and so on. It will take you more than 3 years as a council to know what the community development officer knows, to know what the sports council officer knows, and to know what the other officers that are constantly interfacing. Unfortunately, we don't see them because we expect to see them like here. But they're obviously on the ground constantly doing whatever they have to do in their own way. So we have to work with them as opposed to trying to create something now that makes it a little more cumbersome just to do basic deliveries.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. Just a quick response to one of the things that he would have mentioned. With a population of almost 300,000 persons, I would be sorely disappointed if we could not find 600 persons who are willing to serve their communities in a volunteer capacity. I am not sure if it's just limited to my circles, but I know many persons who already do this as volunteers for communities like Rotaract, Rotary, Kiwanis, and I can go on and on. The Barbadians who take pride in making sure that they can give back to their communities and lend their expertise. I also had the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados volunteer to pull together a group that would assist each People's Assembly in managing their budgets and their finances free of cost on a voluntary basis. So we already have persons who are stepping forward to make sure that these People's Assemblies will work. And I at least have to have faith that Barbadians are willing to help their own communities that they exist in, that they work in, that they play in every single day. If I did not at least have that faith, I would not be here. The public officers, the discussion we've been having with us concern is that they would have an expertise and an in-house knowledge as to what would be required for many of the different areas that we have been discussing, because we do need those connections and that knowledge to be able to get many of these things to work. So that's another reason why we're discussing what their role would be exactly in terms of having them sit on these different assemblies, because we do understand that we as private citizens do not have the know-how as to how things work in government, and having their expertise and their know-how and their would be invaluable to making this work. So we're not going in with the assumption that we know how to get everything done. We're relying on those persons to also lend their expertise. With regards to the role of the minister, I would like to, Member of Parliament, sorry. it was speaking in terms of him mentioning that ministers, we're basically asking the People's Assemblies to play the role of the ministers, but at this point, I'd like to ask the Member of Parliament, Mr. Ralph Thorne, to give more insight as to why those roles have been separated.
Thank you very much, Chair. To be quite frank with you, Everton, we are having a lot of difficulty, even among ourselves, trying to determine what should be the relationship between the parliamentary representative and the Assembly. We're having severe difficulty with that. Now, you've offered a solution, and you must be listened to, except that we're trying to distance the Assemblies from partisan politics. And if you superimpose the parliamentary representative on an assembly, you can understand what will happen. He is a politician, and he will exploit it politically. That's a fact. Yeah, I'm overhearing everyone say you can't stop that, but we are trying to achieve some purity in the character of the People's Assembly. So, admittedly, we still haven't worked out what that relationship should be. Perhaps there should be a relationship. Perhaps it should be informal. I would expect, John, that if an assembly is in your area, as one would be, that you would try to have some kind of a relationship with that assembly. Now, as to whether it would be formal or informal, as to whether John would want to ensure that he has people sitting on the assembly, of course politicians will try to leave their imprint on it, but I am not sure that we should ask the parliamentarian or that we should ask the assembly to be subject to the dictate of a parliamentarian. David was trying to explain that in terms of the delivery of services to the assembly, to the community, that the assembly itself would comprise elected persons who live in the geographical area, together with public servants, SSA, National Sports Council, National Cultural Foundation, all of the agencies that provide services within the community, that they should sit ex officio. I was discussing with Ramel just a few seconds ago, should those public servants also live in the community? He and I had that discussion seconds ago. I think not. It is as awkward as the Commissioner of Police sending a station sergeant to work in an area where he lives. Would be awkward. But these are problems that we're facing conceptually, and we haven't sorted it out as yet. That's why we're here. I wanted to say to Jerome and to Ian that we began with assemblies that are parish-based. In Barbados, parishes have an identity that is historically strong. When we met each other at secondary school, nobody asked if you're from St. Philip North, Jerome. They say you're a St. Philip boy. All the boys like me from St. Michael, we were tongue boys. And they meant St. Michael. So that within the culture of Barbados, the parish is imprinted very, very heavily. And I've always said apart from all the wrong that has occurred in Barbadian society, one of the positives is an inheritance of a well-organized or highly organized public service, that it was organized along on the basis of parishes. Every parish, for example, had a post office. Every parish had a police station. And of course, when the Anglican Church was the church, so to speak, every parish had an Anglican church. So there's a history of social organization. There's a history of a well-organized society administratively. So that is why we went for parish. I think Richard Carter has well explained the artificiality of constituency boundaries. I had a discussion earlier this week with a worker of the SSA. And when I was asking him, for the sake of my constituents, when I was asking him about his collection routes, he wasn't talking constituency. SSA has it demarcated in a completely different way. Perhaps it is parish, I don't know. But certainly it's not constituency. And Richard has made the point. I need not make the point again. But we started out as at parish, and that is why the smaller parishes and the more manageable parishes would have one. The difficulty, you come to St. Michael, how do you demarcate St. Michael? It's going to be extremely difficult, very, very difficult. St. Joseph, there's a St. Joseph identity. St. Philip, there's probably a St. Philip identity already. But again, John, nobody says that he is from St. Philip West. People say, I'm from St. Philip. Yeah, and that is why we are where we are at in terms of a parish identity. And we want to keep that because, as I said, historically, it is well imprinted in this society that a man is from St. Joseph or he's from St. John, and he holds that identity. We even speak differently. We all have provincial accents, whether we like it or not. And that says a lot in a modern Barbados, that in 2019, you can probably still identify a chap by the way he speaks. And we want to keep that. And therefore, we feel that in establishing or maintaining that distance and between partisan politics and the people, Barney, that we should have an identity that is separate and apart from partisan politics. Barney made a very important point, that a lot of people in Barbados feel alienated from the established political institutions. You feel that you cannot get anything done. Yeah, and we feel, we are convicted in the belief that people's assemblies, councils, call it what you wish, you even have the right to persuade us to change the name. But people's councils, but we feel convicted that this is the way forward. I had a discussion with my friend here earlier tonight. This is 40 years too late. 40 years ago, Barbados was almost naturally, people in Barbados almost naturally got into clubs. You can't get a 17-year-old in a club now. Something has gone wrong with our community life. And a properly functioning system of local governance will hopefully bring communities back to life, give communities in Barbados some relevance, control violence. If people have a chance to make the decisions that influence, that affect them on a day-to-day basis. And that's what this is about. We really do want to keep it. Everton, I appreciate your suggestion as to the relationship between the parliamentary representative and the assembly, but this is the time for people to take their destiny into their hands at the local level. Yeah? This is the time. Yes, please.
I just want to address that very quickly, and I know John probably wants to speak, but just want to address it very quickly. I think the way the paper is structured now, we are envisaging the engagement or the presence of the parliamentary representative in terms of the functions. So there are at least 3 functions where there's that presence and engagement with the parliamentary representative. So for example, the community well-being team, it is the way it is structured now, it is envisaged that the community well-being team will be engaging and liaising with the member of parliament or members of parliament, as the case may be. The community forum, where the assembly brings together the community to discuss national issues and pending legislation and so forth. It is envisaged that in that function, the member of parliament is very much involved. Government development planning, where the assembly is helping in terms of identifying what are the needs of the community, whether it's for jobs, for playing fields, for whatever, that again, there's an engagement there with the member of parliament. So the way it is structured, we have not gone the route of inserting the member of parliament directly in the People's Assembly, because the idea is we want the People's Assembly to be a people's instrument that has its own independence and autonomy and is as far as possible non-partisan. But there are functions of the People's Assembly where by the very nature of the function, there has to be an engagement with the member of parliament. So the function determines whether there will be that engagement and presence, you see? So this is how it is structured at present. Well, the People's that's an idea that really needs to be fleshed out. But the feeling was that if you are particularly in the economic climate that Barbados is in, where production is a priority, that the feeling is that if People's Assembly could have as one of its functions to establish some kind of cooperative enterprise that produces. So for example, in St. Phillip, it might be a cooperative farm, for example. So we want to explore that. And remember, you know, this is a paper on which we are consulting. But that is one of the ideas that we need to flesh out. But the idea is that you establish these people's bodies, that maybe one of the functions that people's body could usefully perform for the country is to establish some kind of productive enterprise in the parish or in the assembly area. And we think that obviously the correct structure for productive enterprise of a People's Assembly would tend to be a cooperative. In a rural area, you're probably thinking of a farming cooperative. In an urban area, it might be something more industrial or service-oriented. But again, we need help in fleshing out that idea. But we think that's the kind of contribution a People's Assembly might wish to make to the economy of Barbados.
Thank you. We'll have the... Okay.
My name is Richard Harris. I was very pleased to hear Mr. Thorne talk along the parish lines, because that would be my initial idea in thinking that it should be around parish. I would think that there would be 11 parishes rather than 20 in terms of the 20, since we're having 20 or so or 30 persons making up the People's Assembly. I think that is enough for 11 parishes to serve. In addition to that, I think that there can be 30, and that would make it a lot easier because there's already a platform, a system there in terms of electoral matters, where if you have to go 20, you have to begin to demarcate. Like, for example, if you go, say, A and B, now you have to go and demarcate which is A and which is B, so that A don't come over and vote in B, and B don't go over and vote in A. So that will pose a problem. And since you have that system already, I think that you can go along the 30 line. In addition to that, I think there has to be staffing, because there are persons in the the parishes or constituency, whatever you want to call them, that they will want to have issues, and they want those issues aired and discussed. And there must be some place that they can come and give those issues and what their concerns are to, and that they can get to the People's Assembly so that they can be discussed. So I think there need to be a fixed office in the parish, and also I think there need to be a fixed place where the People's Assembly meet.
Thank you for your contribution. You wanted to say something?
Good evening. My name is Michelle, and I like the idea of the People's Assembly. It doesn't matter to me what its name is. I think that there should be some association with the member of parliament, whether it's constituted along constituency lines or parish lines. I actually like parish lines. And I think there should be some facility where the MP's personal assistant or constituency assistant works with the assembly or the council, whatever we want to call it. I think that the minimum age should be 16, because we need to hear from the youth. I see everyone talking about a Barbados as we know it today. My idea of a constituency, People's Assembly or People's Council is where sanitation is concerned. Barbados needs to move to a place where we actually separate garbage, something that we're not talking about. We have to talk about separating garbage, and whether we put it by grouping parishes together and have either at the MTW or the sanitation little outlet that they have in parishes or whatever they're called, Kevin, thank you, that you can actually bring green waste there. There should be a collection that is scheduled. You know that your green waste has to come out on X date. We keep talking about Barbados being a first world country, but we want to behave as though we're still evolving out in 1937 and we want someone to come and collect all our waste. We should be talking about separating food waste. Food waste can actually be also composted and come back to something that is of benefit to the country. We have places like China that are not taking your waste any longer. So it's not a matter of shipping and making money out of it. We have to start thinking about how we're going to do things that will benefit Barbados. If I don't put out my green waste on the day that the collection is coming, the People's Assembly should have the teeth to enforce the fact that I didn't put it out. And if it's put out on the wrong day, I am responsible for taking it to the place that is to be composted. And I should be asked to pay a fine for that. We are already talking and very upset about paying for the garbage and the sewage tax, but the truth is we all contribute to the sewage and we all contribute to the garbage, but we don't have the educational piece in there that says to us these are things that we need to do because we don't have land space to continue placing garbage in the traditional way that we've been doing it. That's just one on the garbage. As I said, I think there should be ordinances or whatever we want to call them for how we operate in the parishes or in Barbados. I think the Assembly should have the right to hear matters. If I wanted to set up a barbecue grill, I should be able to come and make the application at the People's Assembly office, wherever it is, and I should be able to have a hearing there. If there's a case here in St. Phillip, like just across the road, where someone is renting spaces to persons to conduct barbershops and do car detailing, etc., but there's no bathroom facilities, not even for the persons who operate. And if there are bathroom facilities, there are only the chemical toilets. We should have, in an evolving first world Barbados, a situation where even if I want to maintain my land and keep tenants, I should have a minimum standard that says they should be allowed to somebody that they can wash their hands with free running water and that they can go and use bathroom facilities, even if not for people who are coming to access their services. We, the tenants, and there should be some kind of legislation from central government that says I don't lose my property or my rights to my property because I am lending it to persons who want to do entrepreneurial stuff. I also think that the People's Assembly should have some say in vending. Again, right across at Emerald City, every week the guys get run by the owner. I guess I shouldn't, I will say, yes, it's his property. They're trying to do a little side thing on the side. They're encroaching. Some customers don't like it, but again, we should have a place where it is safe for people to vend, not just on the side of the road, and I stop the car over on the opposite side and then have to traverse between traffic to get to the vendor, who again has no facilities to wash hands, etc., etc. Again, in decentralizing it, because I think it should be looked at as some type of decentralization. We're talking, I heard someone talk about welfare and officers, do we understand that in a 2019 Barbados, if I need a welfare voucher for food, the only place that I can get it is on Robert Street? There's no reason why I should come to my welfare office in St. Phillip and then have to traverse down to Robert Street and have to operate where I have to get it turned around within 24 hours. We have to start thinking about how we're going to treat with ourselves in a way that brings dignity to everyone. And therefore, again, the People's Assembly, the People's Council, whatever we want to call it, should have a facility where it is only in extreme cases that I need to go up to central government, but there should be some minimum standards or guidelines under which they can operate and make decisions. And then it is only, as I said, if there is some kind of blockage that you really need to go to the sitting member of parliament. In that case, then you can go through the constituency assistant or the personal assistant. And even there needs to be a clear demarcation of what that role is, because this is Barbados and we're still down along party lines. And I really don't want to come to the Parliament, to the assistant of a member of parliament for the Democratic Labour Party or the Barbados Labour Party, because I don't want to get branded as being a B, a D, a C, a E, or an F. So there needs to be somewhere in which that entire process is broken down. If not, we're going to continue to have cannibalization of ourselves along party lines. My last thing would be, I think there should be some, I know we're talking about a forum, and we're talking about youth. There's a marginalization in Barbados of what we call the block culture. There needs to be some way in which we can engage those persons. And then, I know I said the last, I'm thinking also when we talk about space of property, not just persons, personal properties in developments, and etc., where those persons, again, I shouldn't have to go up to central government to be able to find that person for not clearing their spot. That is something that should be done, whether it is through the polyclinic in a particular area, we group them all together. There should also be some facility where persons, if they chose to, can help to maintain areas for beautification. I see it being done now in developed countries, in France, in California. I know Mr. Gibbs already does some of that, but where you can actually have residents responsible for pieces, if you want to call it plots of land, that they can hold for a period of time, whether it's 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, to help beautify and maintain what's happening, even if at the parish level, you engage persons to help maintain it. Because I saw something about the Assembly having a budget and being able to do some work. And that is a way that we can also, if we did the composting, we can have employment generated in the areas where people are. And we can also then go into volunteerism after that. Because if you do this, then there's an aspect of volunteerism that has to come along with it. And that's my suggestions at the moment.
Before you run away, just a quick question. Would you be willing to participate?
Yes, I would be.
You're welcome to come to the mic, but please make note that we are very close to running out of time, and I will cut you off.
But I would find it, but this is the point, I would find it rather strange, because one of the things that I've noticed, when it was Johnny, my boy, singing Calypso, I'm a member of a community. Mm-hmm. As soon as I become a politician, I become an outsider. This makes absolutely no sense. Now, I'm very serious. This makes absolutely no sense. And so that for us to have a conversation that says that in order for you to interact with your parliamentary representative who did not put himself there, but you did, that it becomes in some way that he can influence what is being done at a community level. but I'm a part of the community also. So the interest of mine is the interest of the community. And so therefore, if the conversation cannot even get past partisan thinking, this whole thing is doomed to fail before it starts. Because there has to be a level of maturity within the people of Barbados to understand that regardless of B's, D's, NDPs, or whatever, what are we first and foremost? We're Barbadians. And so therefore, we are
lovers
Barbadians.
of Barbados.
I don't matter where you, I born in England. So I born in England. We are Barbadians first and foremost. So that if you cannot even begin the conversation by seriously looking at what is it that you want for your community. You keep coming back to the same thing all the time. Government, sanitation, this, government. Let me tell you something. When the garbage is packed up outside your house and nobody moves it, who stands to get disease from rats and all? This is you. So you can't sit down with this nonsense all the time. This body ain't moving, this body come from Cartersville, just cross there by Parish Church. There was a time when they had a strike, and my mother and the people that live down through the gap get together and pay a man to move the garbage. You don't sit down and because when you sit down and you decide that the only thing that can happen now is if the parliamentary representative got to do it. What happened if parliamentary drop down there tomorrow? The community has to work. Let me get serious. And you know me, I never a person that has my mouth. The parliamentary representative has to interface. There is a certain interdependency between him and the community that has to take place. If it does not work that way, it will not work. Because you can't have a community operating where the parliamentary feels he is being usurped by a council. And I heard people talk about the political interference. Well, let me tell you something in case you don't know. The words basically got two certain personalities. Mr. Carter, you would know. Social and antisocial people. If you put antisocial people, you can't say it on the CV. But they could come into the same councils and drive it to hell. You don't know we make sport? They can do it because they're antisocial by nature. And that is what they do. They come in and tell you and try to make it into a political thing now and mash it up before it starts. So the thing is, how do you now determine outside of the CV and the certificates and all this thing, what is it that you're looking for to come on to these assemblies to give service to their community and to their country? That is where this conversation has to go. Because a pretty CV don't mean one thing if the person has no character.
Which is why we clarified at the beginning that we emphasize the CV is not academic in nature, but emphasizes your contribution and you represent to the persons who will be voting for you.
Who is going to determine that the person or persons are fit to be on the assembly or the council, whatever you call it?
The people.
Right. So the people are going to vote for whoever, which means, and I've heard the conversation go to getting rid of the constituency out of it, but I would like to think that even if you have the assembly, that the assembly can find a way to ensure that they have people within each constituency, within each box, who can report to them, who could then liaison again with the representative and get things done. Because at the end of the day, the same people that vote for the MP is the same people that get skinny out when time comes. And whoever else come, gonna have to deal with them the same way. You cannot get away from it. Don't fool yourself. The place is too small to start off with. So let us take this conversation to what is it that we can achieve, because the assembly, in my mind, the council, whatever you call it, is a brilliant idea. What it needs now It's for people to think outside of that political box and work out how are we as members of the community, St. Philip, how are we going to contribute to it to make it happen in the best interest of ourselves and our children. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. You can come if you can keep it short. Yes, you can come. We're watching the time, so.
Yeah. Good night. My name is Ernest. I must first say I like the idea, People's Assembly, and I want people to understand we got to treat it as the People's Assembly and not the House Assembly, right? My honest problem that I have is that what I notice, all of these committees and all kinds of stuff are formed, and all Barbadians seems to do is talk, no action. I think what we need, if you form this together, we need doers. Not just talk, we're going to do this, and everybody talk pretty, and nothing have behind it. I also saw in there volunteers. And when I look at numbers, volunteers do need a lot of numbers, because I'll tell you this, I've been in organizations before that got volunteers, and when it's come for action, you don't see many people. So the more people on that make the work a little lighter. And I don't worry about numbers, because you should keep the numbers up as high as we can get them. I think what's actually happened, people looking at who sits on committees and who do this, who's the boss. But we want workers, we want people who can get to and do things. And that's the honest way it's going to happen. And also I'm wondering how, if I want to be a member in my community, what do I have to do? I might live in this community here, only the people in this community know me. But if people are going to vote, do I have to campaign? What do I do? In other words, if
it would
you
not be an electioneering, but you would present to the persons when it's time for vote why they should vote for you. You have an opportunity to speak on your own behalf.
But I'm saying if I'm just saying something for the first time, you just met me for the first time, I give you all this special thing about me. You don't know much. Join the church. So in other words, I got to get involved in organizations and to be known. Well, I'll tell you this. So I support the initiative. I just hope that it's not just talk, and we can find some people to do stuff. I heard the colleagues saying that they got different councils that do this and do the next. And I sat there and I said to myself, we got the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, right? And we got polyclinics, right? And we got private practitioners, right? All in the same health, looking after people. More hands, the better.
Yep.
So don't quiet down, just put our effort together and do this. Thank you.
Definitely appreciate your comments. Okay. St. Philip fires up near the end.
I'm Trevor Marshall. I just want to support what the minister just said, because that was going through my mind all along, because there is, just like they have in the US right now, a division. There is a division among parties in Barbados. And even as we are here tonight, we are hearing talk about constituency and assembly. You know, you will get people who are from one political wagon saying one thing and try to oppose. My concern, though, was what Angela raised ever since, about the fact that, I mean, when you're looking here tonight, how many people are here? So the residents in St. Philip are not even coming out.
That was raised on social media as well.
Somebody talked about the DEOs. Mm-hmm. Nobody comes to those either. And they have disasters, they have floodings, and people in St. Philip don't come out. So we have a problem that we have to be able to get the people in the neighborhoods to come out to such meetings and know what is going on. Yeah.
Encourage your neighbors to
come you
out.
do that.
Because another issue that was raised at some of the other town halls was that the initial one, know that you get persons to see what it's like and everything else, that they would like us to come back, so that by the time you come back, know that you have a better understanding, you get a feel for it and everything else, you can get more persons to come out and be able to share what
Yeah.
they believe should be happening. And that's something that we also are taking under advisement
okay.
as to whether we'd go back to each community, if that would be practical, or if we'd have one large assembly. We'll make a decision as to how we will come back out. But we definitely would like to do that.
Okay. Anyhow, I support the whole idea.
Thank you so much. You wanted to... Yes.
Sorry, I was just saying that just to write on what he said, maybe you can, if you're going to have a second meeting or second meetings, advise the churches too, because those are assemblies in themselves, and they can get the people to come out to the meeting that you will have.
Yes.
Yeah?
Thank you.
And the children.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add, just to add quickly as well, just so the audience knows, this this meeting and everything that's being said at both mics is being streamed internationally on social media. So there are people all over the world who are tuning in the diaspora and hearing what is being said.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, good night. My name is Walter, and I must say that it's because of Ian I'm here. I wasn't even aware that there was a meeting here this tonight, and I guess a number of other persons might be thinking the same thing. But first, let me start off by saying this. Any attempt to empower Barbadians into any governance model, I totally agree with. Right? Let me start with that. So I support the constituency councils, and I certainly would support anything, you could call it whatever you want to call it. But I think one of the things that, listening to everybody tonight, it has to do with the delivery of public services. So I see sanitation and QH and all that kind of thing. And how the ordinary Barbadian citizen can feel empowered in how the delivery of those services are being done. So for instance, we have an issue with the garbage, and we complain. And sometimes we wonder if it's falling on deaf ears, because sometimes we don't see the trucks. How is it then, if we set up an assembly, do we have the power to be able to construct a way that these services are delivered in a way that we as citizens will like? Same thing with health. So it's all about delivery health services. One of the things I was saying, I was listening to that, and I listened to Brother Thorne and Commission. I was just wondering if the councils or whatever, I know you don't like councils, what's the other word? Assemblies. I wonder if the assemblies would have the power of recall. That is just something that I just throw out there, because in some countries, assemblies do. You are the minister of whatever, and we don't think that you are doing a good enough job, then you must come in front of the assembly, and we must be able to grill you. You must be able to give us answers that make sense. And if you don't think that you're doing the correct thing, yes, if you're not doing the right thing, then we should have, as people, and not wait every 5 years to try to say, we'll get rid of you. But we must be able to, because you are spending monies from the public purse, which everybody in here, I hope, will be paying taxes. So it's our money, and we should have the right to determine whether it's being spent properly or not. I saw this document for the first time, and there is a next meeting when, well?
Next week.
Yes. West and okay. I will tell you this, I'm going to go through the document, and I think I will come to the meeting, I will put some proposals on the table, because one of the things that we needed to do as well, we need to engage civil society in this. I heard somebody talk about the church just now. We are not going to move forward unless we engage as broad as much persons as possible. And that is something that we need to do. So I'm not, like I said, I started my opening remarks by saying any attempt to empower the normal citizens of this country in any governance model must be something that we must all support. That is my position.
Thank you for your comments. And at this point, I will bring the meeting to a close. I would like to reiterate that our next one is next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the West Terrace Primary School, and that will be the last one for the year. We will then restart in 2020. We want to give a break for Christmas because we know that's where everybody's concerns will be. But please stay tuned to listen out for when our next meetings will be. You do not have to be limited to the town hall that's in your community. If you want to come and share, you're quite welcome to do so. Please listen out for all of the communications via GIS. We also have a Facebook page that you're welcome to go on, where you can see all the information about the meetings, the times, the locations, and the documentation. So thank you so much for your participation, and I wish everyone a wonderful night.